All right, here we go. So good morning. Welcome to the City of Sebastian's first Understanding of Property Taxes workshop here today. So what we're going to do is I'm going to give a presentation on what you can expect and looking at what property taxes are utilized for within the city. Our goal today is so that you are informed on what property taxes are used for. Towards the end of the presentation, we'll discuss some potential alternatives. We'll also discuss one bill that is passing currently through the legislature. I'll get further into detail when we get to that slide. But just trying to provide some facts. And then at the end, we'll give you all a chance to ask some questions. My name is Brian Benton. I'm the city manager. I also have our Chief Financial Officer, Brian Stewart, is here. Our Human Resources Director, Cindy Watson. Our Fleet Superintendent, Dave Moore. Our City Attorney, Jim Stokes. Our Acting City Clerk, Kathy Testa. Chief of Police, Daniel Acosta, is in the back. And we have our IT staff here as well helping with this. And I do want to recognize we have Councilmember Ed Dodd in attendance as well here today. So at the end, we'll give you a chance to ask some questions regarding property tax that we will provide some answers. And if there's anything we have to get back with you individually on, we can do that as well. So with that, we'll get started with the presentation. All right, so as I mentioned, the goal here today is to discuss property taxes and what it means specifically to the city of Sebastian. There's a lot of talk out in the media, on social media, about property taxes as a whole across the state. And our plan, as I mentioned earlier, is to give you information specifically to Sebastian. So we're going to discuss what are property taxes, how are they generated, what do property taxes fund within the city of Sebastian, what is homestead versus non-homestead? What's that impact look like? And some potential alternatives to property taxes or potential cuts to general fund as a result of property tax reduction. So, as I mentioned, while we're hosting this, lots of discussion regarding property taxes and potential elimination. State legislation is discussing property tax elimination and the reduction. Through multiple bills have been filed in the House. House Joint Resolution did pass the Florida House on February 19th. This proposes the elimination of all non-school ad valorem taxes. If bills are passed, they will then be placed on the ballot for voters to decide. So we'll get into that a little bit further once we get to the House Joint Resolution, but the voters will make the ultimate decision when it comes to property tax reform. The city's goal is to provide factual information to our residents regarding the usage of property taxes. So to start off, what are property taxes? Property taxes are local, ad valorem, which is value-based, taxes on real property and commercial personal property. Property taxes, what is used in the computation of property taxes is called the millage rate. That is set annually by your city council. Your city council, through presentations provided by staff, comes to the final result on a millage rate that goes through public workshops that we have with council regarding the budget, and also goes through public hearings. We're required to have multiple public hearings in preparation for adopting the final millage rate. Your properties are assessed annually by the county property appraiser. Property taxes are then collected annually by the county property tax collector. Property taxes are stable and predictable revenue source for the city when preparing the annual budget and primary local funding source for general fund operations. And we'll discuss what general fund operations include as we get further along. So how are your property taxes calculated? Property tax formula is utilized, as I mentioned. The property appraiser establishes a just market value on your property. It's then calculated less state increase caps, which 3% on Save Our Homes is the max that your just value if you are a homesteaded property owner within the city. 3% caps your just value increase on an annual basis. If you are non-homestead, it is capped at 10%. So that means your just value that is utilized in calculating this number can only increase by 3% annually if you are a homestead property owner and 10% non-homestead. This comes up with your assessed value. Then there's exemptions that fall into place, so we start to deduct the exemptions. You have property tax exemptions. Currently, homestead has a $50,000 exemption, and then also disabled veterans and a few other areas have increased exemptions that are provided. That equals your taxable value. Your taxable value is then multiplied by your millage rate. As I mentioned before, your millage rate is set by City Council. An example is 1 mil equals $1 per $1,000 of taxable value. That then equals your property tax owed. Here in the city of Sebastian, so that you're aware on your property tax bill, the city's millage rate this current fiscal year is 3.4455. So for every dollar per $1,000, it's multiplied by 3.4455. So millage rates, when you get your property tax bill, there's a lot of information on there, and this breaks it down a little simpler when it comes to ad valorem taxes. So ad valorem taxes, also known as property taxes, on your tax bill. This dollar bill breaks down to show the area in red is Indian River County taxes. So this is the millage rate that's established by Indian River County, plus the emergency services tax that's established in there that pays for fire rescue, because the city does not have fire rescue. That's provided by the county. So you can see that Indian River County's portion, and we use a dollar bill here just for the simple terms that it's easy to break a dollar bill down. So 36 cents of every dollar that you pay in property taxes goes to Indian River County. The next item in blue, Indian River County School Board. So 34.8 cents of every dollar you pay in property taxes goes to Indian River County Schools. So those are the two largest elements on your property tax bill. The city of Sebastian, then our property tax portion is 20.8 cents. So when you get your property tax bill, all of that funding does not go to the city. As you can see, 36 cents of a dollar goes to Indian River County, 34 cents, roughly 35 cents, goes to Indian River County Schools. The city gets 20.8 or 21 cents roughly out of every dollar. Then you have the hospital district, which receives 4.6 cents of a dollar. And in other taxing districts, you've got improvement districts, you've got water management districts, all of those, mosquito control, those districts get 3.7 cents established between those. So in our initial discussion, I mentioned that there has been a bill that has passed the House of Representatives at the state. So that you all are, just to be fully transparent, when a bill is passed by one chamber, you have two chambers in legislative session in Tallahassee. You have the House of Representatives and the Senate. They both have to agree to pass a bill. Once it is then passed by both legislative branches, it then goes to the governor for his signature for approval, or he can veto the bill. The House has passed what's known as HJR 203. This language initially started, the original bill started out with an increased homestead exemption of $100,000 a year for the next 10 years, gradually eliminating property tax. So year one would have been an additional $100,000 exemption. Year two would have been $200,000. Year three, $300,000, all the way until you get to year 10, which would ultimately result in no property taxes for homesteaded properties, except school taxes. So schools are exempt from this bill. So what you pay in school tax, if this bill were to pass, it would still stay on your tax bill to pay schools. However, once it got to the House floor last Thursday, there was an amendment to the bill. The bill was amended to establish the complete elimination of property taxes for homesteaded properties effective January 1st of 2027. Once again, that has passed the House of Representatives. It has been sent to the Senate. If that language is passed by the Senate, it would then go to the governor, and then whatever is passed by both chambers and signed off by the governor gets put as a referendum on the ballot. So then it would come to the voters, and the voters would decide whether they are for or against the ballot measure. And that's part of the reason we're here today. We're just trying to inform you all of what is paid for by property taxes within the city. So a potential impact of HJR 203 on the city of Sebastian. City estimates collection of ad valorem taxes to be $8,393,178. Total number of properties in the city of Sebastian is 14,540. With that, homestead and non-homestead, as we discussed earlier, and we'll discuss on another slide, homesteaded properties equate for 64% of that at 9,279 properties. Non-homestead is 36% at 5,261. Total dollar amounts, homesteaded properties account for 57% of the ad valorem taxes that are collected at $4,756,309. Non-homestead is 43%, which equates to a little bit over $3.6 million. So the city's general fund would see a reduction in revenues of $4,756,309, which equates to 24% of the annual general fund revenue generated by the city. So the city of Sebastian is a little different from other parts of the state. When you hear a lot in the media that says the reduction homestead on property taxes, just the property taxes in general, state average is about a 36% reduction in property taxes based on the proposed bill. Sebastian is different when it comes to this measure because of how high our homestead rate is within the city and how low commercial property we have here. It's part of our quality of life in Sebastian. It's what the residents have wanted. They've wanted to maintain it and keep it a small fishing village. And with that, that means we are more heavily dependent on homesteaded properties when it comes to our property tax revenue. So the city's homestead property percentage of 64% is almost double the state average. And the 57% of property tax revenue is over 20 percentage points higher than the state average of 36%. So just want to share that information that we are almost double the number of a typical municipality or city, and there's 411 of those across the state. When we come to that, we're more than double the average with homestead property percentages. So general fund revenues by type. This breaks down how we generate our roughly a little bit over $19 million in general fund for our budgeting purposes. With that, property tax, the numbers here, these are off of a previous fiscal year, so it won't show the actual property tax percentages here for this fiscal year. But roughly 38% was property tax in this fiscal year. Utility tax, which is levied on purchase of electricity, water, LP gas, and natural gas within city limits, is 21%. Licenses, permits, fees, and charges for services are 7%. This includes plan review, inspection fees, business taxes, etc. Intergovernmental revenue, half-cent sales tax, 8-cent fuel tax. Municipal revenue sharing is 21%. And in the other category for general fund, that's interest, fines, and service fees that are established within the city. So when you start to look at the effects of House Joint Resolution 203 on revenues as it's currently passed the House, it shows, this graph here shows expenditures by department is the first one on the left. The one that's highlighted in the orange on the very top is our police department. Our police department does equate to a large percentage of our budget. It is almost, I think it's like 49% is our police department in general fund. And then you kind of continue to go down from there in departments, and we'll go over each individual department here shortly. Revenues, you'll see our revenues match our expenditures. We have a balanced budget. That's how we establish our budget on an annual basis, and it's always balanced. And then you will see the roughly over $4 million deficit in revenues if the bill passes. So that would greatly impact our expenditures by department, as is shown to the left, if we only have, the dollars that are assigned by House Joint Resolution 203 with the reduction in homesteaded property taxes. So homesteaded properties are primary Florida residents, receive currently up to a $50,000 exemption. And as I mentioned earlier, your assessment is growth capped at 3% annually for your just market value. Non-homestead properties, so ultimately, there will be some cuts to service, but there also would potentially be looked at from a council perspective, how to, if we can't make a complete reductions to make up for the $4 million, we have to generate revenue some other way, which could potentially involve an increase in the millage rate against non-homesteaded properties. These would be your rentals, your second homes, and your commercial properties within the city of Sebastian. They currently have no homestead exemption, and their just market value can only increase by 10% annually. So what do property taxes fund for Sebastian residents? So, police department, that funds our road patrol, our police operations, our detective unit, code enforcement, dispatch, all of those fall within the police department as it is funded currently, as we operate within our police department. Public works, this includes roads, bridges, and maintenance throughout the city. Our garage and fleet operations, which maintain all of our vehicles and machinery that we have throughout the city. Sidewalks and engineering within the city. Information technology and cybersecurity. We're here in this room. We have our IT staff here. It is broadcast. We always broadcast on our TV station through Comcast, but then also through social media channels, Facebook. A lot of times we have Zoom that's active, and then also all of our computers and software throughout the city, CAD RMS system that's used by the police department when they respond to calls. All of those elements fall within the IT department, and cybersecurity is one of our main priorities as we look into IT. Parks and recreation, we have 23 parks within the city of Sebastian. That is a lot of parks for the population that we have within the city, but it's something that's been made a priority within the city to ensure that our residents have a place that they can go and enjoy and just get out in the sun and enjoy themselves throughout the community. Public facilities, we have many facilities throughout the city that are available for the public to utilize. That department is funded by general fund as well. Our finance department, which handles all of the city's finances, our investments and retirement accounts, all of the funds, revenues, expenditures that all come in throughout the city. Planning and zoning, this staff is in our community development department. They handle all of the applications that come in for development, for fence permits, for additions, onto your properties and things like that all have to go through planning and zoning as we continue to function. Code enforcement, they go out and address code violations throughout the city to try to maintain our quality of life here in Sebastian. Human resources handles all of our benefits, hiring of employees, recruitment of employees, and then lastly, city administration, the city attorney, city manager, and city clerks. All of our departments are also funded by the general fund and within all of those operations as well. So now we get down to the specifics on general fund expenditures by departments. As you can see in this, our total general fund is $19,883,990. On this presentation, you will see that police department is 45% of our general fund, which is roughly $8.4 million. And this information was provided from the previous fiscal year because that has been audited and looked at, and we want to make sure we provide those correct numbers. So basically going from that's our largest percentage in this. From that you will see, and I'll just go kind of counterclockwise from that, you'll see facilities maintenance on the left equates for 5% of general fund. Parks and recreation accounts for 10% of our general fund. Cemetery operations, 1%. Community development, 4%. Non-departmental is 9%. City council is a percentage of 1%. It is total budget of $82,305 in almost a $20 million general fund budget. City manager's office is 3%. City clerk's office is 2%. City attorney's office is 1%. Finance department, 4%. Management information services IT, information technology, is 4%. Human resources, 2%. Roads and drainage, public works is 8%, and fleet management, our garage, is 2% of the general fund. So when you start to look at these and you think of having to cut $4 million, which is roughly 24% of our budget, the bill, one thing I failed to mention, I do want to clarify on House Joint Resolution, is it does require us to maintain current levels in public safety. So our police department will continue to be funded at these levels. Or at the level that is presented in the current fiscal year budget, and it would probably fall into the current fiscal year 27 budget is what I'm anticipating. However, the rest of the $4 million would involve cuts to all of these other departments as we continue to go through. So with that, kind of showing what that amount, that over $19.8 million accounts for, roughly $15.3 million of that goes to personnel costs. So when you look at the city of Sebastian and kind of how we operate amongst our departments, the place that we will cut, when we start to look at these things, is if we can't replace the revenue and find out a way to generate additional revenue sources, then we would have to look at, obviously, personnel and our operating. So with that, this kind of shows this information that 19.8 million is the roughly the green diagram, and 15.3 million is the orange element that's current in this fiscal year. In regards to total expenditures is the green, and personnel cost is the orange. I will state that just so you all have the knowledge, our number of employees per 1,000 residents is currently at 5.91. So we currently have 5.91 employees per 1,000 residents. That number is derived. It is not specific to general fund. So it does include some other departments that are funded by enterprise funds. And so our enterprise funds are the building department, the golf course, the airport, and stormwater. So those enterprise funds have to fund themselves. That's why you didn't see them listed in general fund. They fund themselves based on non-ad valorem fees, fees for services within the building department, rents, and other funding sources for the airport, and then user fees at the golf course. So that number does include those as well when we look at those. So property taxes versus other sources. Why property taxes are important to the city? They're more stable. It's a guaranteed number. We can budget for it based on the millage rate that's established and know that our collection rate is somewhere typically between 95 and 97% on the tax bill annually. It's more flexible, which equals less waste, can divert resources to needed areas. The reason I say that is we have some other funding sources that go towards capital projects, discretionary sales tax and local option gas tax, that are used to fund many of the projects that you see in the city. Those sources of revenue cannot be used for staffing. They are specific to being used only for infrastructure, improvements, land acquisition, and items of those such. Where property taxes is more flexible for us, it does allow us to be able to use it in different areas in general fund. That includes being able to play, as I mentioned, employee salaries and benefits and such. It's more predictable, budgets are more reliable. Oftentimes what we see in some of our other sources that come in, intergovernmental funds and franchise fees, differing factors can vary those as we go through the fiscal year. We see a lot of times that our funding that comes from sales tax can vary depending on when we had COVID. There was a lot less sales tax that was coming into the city. So those variable amounts do vary, and it's heavily dependent. And property tax is more predictable for our budgetary needs. Bond markets prefer stable revenues, which is property tax. Less risk equals lower borrowing rates. So that will have to be something. Currently, the city of Sebastian in general fund has zero debt. We have no debt. So, as we start to look in the future, if we have to go out to get some, accrue some debt, then, property tax plays a major part in that because it is a stable revenue source that we can depend on when we go out into the market. Exemptions with portability. limited growth by state caps, and transparency, clear formula and publicly set rates. Millage rates, we start our process for budget development in February. We have public workshops that are open, transparent, right here in this council chambers in June and July. We have those workshops that take place. And then we also have a Citizens Advisory Budget Committee, which meets all along throughout the entire process, that is getting the same information that City Council is receiving at their meetings. And then as we get closer to the end of the budgeting process, there's many discussions that take place in our public meetings. And then also we have to have 2 public hearings when we get to September on the millage rate. It's as transparent as it can be. You can come in and ask questions during the workshops. You can come in during those public hearings that take place in September. Those are times that the public can ask questions. And then you can come to see me in my office or see our finance director, chief financial officer, to ask questions as well. Our budget is posted, it's out there, it's on the website, and any questions, we are available to answer any of those. So comparing those to fees limited to services provided, we can only obviously charge fees on services provided, and then obviously if you raise those fees too high, people will just stop using those services. And that's something that isn't as stable as property tax. Assessments can only be limited to specific service areas. You'll see a little bit later when we talk about potential avenues that we can take. I'll use one as an example, roadway lighting. We could establish a special district to pay for roadway lighting that would assess all the property owners within that district, but it can only obviously be in an area where we have street lighting. We can't assess the entire city for street lighting in one specific area. So it has to be specific to the service area. Grants, project specific and limited. We have applied for, over the last 3 years, we have applied for over $30 million in grants. We have received quite a bit of that. However, if you start to look at even the state budget that's rolled out, some of those grant opportunities are being eliminated. So we are going out there and applying for every grant opportunity that we can find to help fund projects that alleviate concerns of our residents. However, those are starting to be looked at closely from a state and a federal level as well, because we do have to go after federal grants as well. Special assessments, those are restricted use. It depends on certain elements and certain ways to do those. It typically, a lot of times with those, has to be a direct impact on the property owner on that specific property. So it can't just be a generalized assessment throughout the city. So if property taxes were eliminated, the immediate impacts would be removal of local control and responsiveness to tax changes. Major general fund revenue loss. I showed you earlier, it's 24% of our budget would be eliminated if this bill passes through the legislature and ultimately through the voters. Longer response times to citizen requests due to staffing reductions. As I showed you before, we are our budget is very heavily on staffing and personnel. That would be one of the key areas we have to take a look at. And with that would involve some staffing reductions, reduce parks and recreation programs and maintenance. We'd have to take a look at the programs and the maintenance that we provide. And that's just a reality. Right now, we try to maintain our parks up to a certain standard. We try to offer as many programs as we can that the community want. And I can tell you that with our budget and with our staffing levels currently, we offer specifically what is wanted and what is needed within the city already. But then we would just have to take a look at those measures and kind of see how we could do some cuts in those areas. Infrastructure maintenance delays. You notice one of the things that I didn't mention was projects. Projects, as I mentioned earlier, quite a few of those are funded by a different source that cannot be used by general fund. But maintenance is a key item, which then is going to drive up the cost of projects, because if we're not able to maintain certain infrastructure, our roads, our stormwater, and different areas such as that, and building maintenance and things like that, then ultimately those costs will go up because we'll have to do replacements as opposed to just maintaining. And we all know maintaining is cheaper than new construction. Increased reliance on fees or other taxes. That would be a potential option as we start to look down this pathway. So some specific, Sebastian-specific considerations. As I mentioned earlier, the assessment caps have caused the value to be reduced to 71% of market value. So over the years, as your value of the property has increased, the assessment caps that have been put on by Save Our Homes at the 3% and the 10% non-homestead, those have caused those increases to be reduced down to only 71% of market value. 15.25% of assessed value is homesteaded versus the statewide average of 5.05%. So with this, in 2025, Sebastian was top 20 in the state in assessed value versus homestead, highest percentage, which means that we are in the top 20 cities in the state that are dependent on homestead per this market study of the actual assessed value versus the homestead. We have a very small commercial base. This has been done on purpose. This has been a priority of our residents. They've wanted to keep Sebastian what Sebastian is. However, that does impact us when we come to property taxes. We do not have the commercial tax base that many other local municipalities have. And as I mentioned earlier, 6.1 city employees per 1,000 residents. So where would the funds come from? Possible scenarios, shifting the burden to non-homestead and commercial properties. That would involve millage rate increases to non-homesteaded properties. Shift to special assessments on the tax bill, as I mentioned earlier, that limits flexibility. Some of those, they would have to be road maintenance assessments and being able to, on certain roadways, to be specific to those districts and those areas where we need to do that road maintenance. Street lighting assessment, as I mentioned before, that's an option. That's something that many municipalities and counties do across the state in regards to street lighting in certain areas. State funds and loss of local control, increase fees for services and initiate new fees. We would look at parking fees, potential boat ramp fees, and increased recreation program fees with this as well. And I will state, increased recreation program fees that would affect our, when we look at Little League and football, those are third-party sources that operate those programs. Currently, the city does not have a user fee for those programs. It is a great program that provides for the youth of this community. However, as we go forward, that would have to be something that's looked at, which in return would raise those third-party fees if the city had to charge a fee to them. So today, our key takeaways for residents. Property taxes fund your core city services. They're the things you depend on every single day. Property taxes, it has been mentioned that it's just, it's something that you're paying that's keeping you from really owning your home. Property taxes are paying for law enforcement. They're paying for your road maintenance. They're paying for parks, recreation. They're paying for the daily services that you depend on to enjoy the quality of life that we offer here in the city of Sebastian. Core services such as emergency services require consistent funding. Homestead exemptions reduce individual tax burden. Eliminated property taxes would require service cuts or new revenue sources. And decisions involve trade-offs between taxes and service levels. So with that, I will turn it over. We'll open it up now for a question and an answer for anyone that has questions of us in regards to property tax. And if you would, please, I need to make sure I get you a microphone because we are recording this and we want to make sure we get the questions on the broadcast as well.
Thank you. Are we on?
You're on.
Brian, what freedoms or constraints does the city have when it comes to enacting new taxes? I mean, do we just wake up one morning and say we're going to tax all cats and dogs in the city? Or, I mean, what would be the process and the authority?
Yeah, so we do not have the authority to establish new taxes. The state preempts us from that. The state establishes what fees we can charge, what taxes we can charge. We can increase and establish new fees. That is something that will be looked at with this. Obviously, we'll look at what needs to happen in regards to service level cuts But then ultimately, I think it would come down to having to generate some additional revenue from fees for services or fees in general. But we do not have the authority to establish new taxes within the city. Yeah, could you just state your name too? Sorry, so Scott Baker was the first one. Can you just state your name for the record, please?
David Garner. Yeah, I'm originally from Palm Beach County, and Palm Beach County, they pay property tax down there just like the rest of Florida does. And in Palm Beach County, you go down to Palm Beach County, even though they're paying taxes, you said that, oh, we'd probably have to pay for parking, we'd probably have to pay for boat ramp and all that. They're already paying that down there. It's going to come here anyway, whether we pay property tax or not. It's going to come to this city. Everything that goes to these other counties come to this city too. So whether you vote for keeping property tax or not keeping property tax, you're still going to end up paying for that boat ramp. You're still going to end up paying for parking. That's just coming. It's coming regardless whether we vote no or yes. And Ron DeSantis said that there's enough revenue in Florida that we shouldn't have to pay property tax anyway. So whether y'all vote yes or no on property tax, it don't matter. There's enough revenue in this state that we shouldn't have to pay. We paid taxes when we bought our property. You shouldn't have to keep paying taxes on something that you already own. Thank you.
Yes, I don't think there was a question there, but I'll just kind of point to a couple points that he did mention there. Currently, you're correct. Other places, and I mentioned it when I talked about street lighting, other municipalities do charge for parking. They do charge for the boat ramp usage or parking of your trailer. They do charge all those little fees that do add up. That is something we so far have decided not to do in Sebastian. I quite honestly can't speak for city council. It has not been something that's been established as a priority within our strategic plan or within our goals to establish that in the near future. So I can't speak for far out, but currently with our current situation, that is not something that has been discussed with us doing that in the immediate near future. In regards to state funding, my understanding from this bill is it does not provide any additional funding to municipalities. There has been some discussion about providing funding to make up some of the reduction for fiscally constrained counties. Indian River County does not fall underneath that. So currently, and this bill didn't even address that. I think, in its current form, it did not address that in the current form. But for the city of Sebastian, there has been no discussion from the state to replace or provide us any additional funding than what we already get.
Kind of in response to the point that you just made, Toby Overdorf, who's a representative and was the co-chair of the group that was put together by the House to evaluate property tax reductions, said in a Treasure Coast Regional Planning Council meeting a month or so ago that for the state to make up the revenue lost from property tax reductions would involve a 16 to 18% sales tax. Now, I believe a yes vote on doing away with property taxes may well involve increasing sales tax to somewhere between 16 and 18%. That's got nothing to do with boat ramp charges. That's got to do with your grocery store bill and everything else. And so the state will have to make up that revenue. Infrastructure is a major issue. If we don't maintain the streets, somebody's going to have to maintain them, and the state's going to have to come up with that money. And their only way to do that is through either a sales tax or an income tax. He was very adamant about the fact that nobody in Tallahassee wants to talk about income tax. So, wait, you have to have the mic. Wait, take the mic.
We pay taxes when you fill up your car with gasoline. There's a high tax on gas. We pay taxes for that. Every time you do something, you pay taxes. We pay enough taxes that we should never have to pay property tax. Never, nobody, not any county, not any state. And let me,
So,
huh?
sir, no,
Do
let's
what?
don't.
No, go ahead. I want him to say what he's got to say.
No, but sir, so I'm going to respond to that about the gas tax because that is a specific item that was mentioned. The city, we do have a 6 cent per gallon tax levied by Indian River County. Those tax funds are distributed to participating cities within the county on a percentage base determined by the city's population and amount of annual transportation type expenditures. I will say that our local option gas tax projections decreased for fiscal year 2026. We will generate roughly, our projected revenue is $709,020. However, that is a specific revenue source. It can't be used for staffing. It can only be used for roadway maintenance and preservation, which it funds. If you have been over in the area of Kildare and Schumann, we have done some preservation work there this year. That was over $1 million in preservation work that took place over there. So the money that was generated this year doesn't even pay for that, for what took place there in regards to gas tax.
Hello, my name is Bobby Brown. I'm a first-time homeowner. I've been in Sebastian about 2 years now. My wife and I moved up here from Palm Beach County as well. We made that decision because this is decidedly not Palm Beach County. We love it here. One of the reasons we love it here is the quality of life you referenced in the presentation. My question is fairly large in scope, and perhaps you can help me break it down. What will this proposed bill, what will the impact be on our community's ability to make decisions for our own community? Is it going to shrink or influence that ability? Is it going to limit us? And I would love to hear from the city manager and Councilmember Dodd if that's possible as well.
Yeah, so I'll address that first. As I've shown on a couple of slides, we're going to lose general fund revenue of about 24%. That's a quarter of what we have to offer within each of those departments. And remember, look, I'll tell you, we just negotiated, and the chief is in the back, but we just negotiated a police contract last year that fully supported our police officers and was fully supported by our city council. So that is not something we're going to look at touching in regards to that, and we're not allowed to by this bill. So I want to state that initially. So now you're left with roughly 50% of your budget to now cut 24%. What does that look like? I think it really is going to come down to what our options are in regards to what fees we can establish and what fees we can't establish. Are there any potential assessment mechanisms that can be utilized? If none of those are options, then I think you'll see major reductions in parks and recreation, public works, staffing across the other departments within the city. I think that's where you see your biggest kind of impacts, because those are the things that are forward facing. There'll obviously be other things that happen here in City Hall, but those are the things that you see on a daily basis. You ride by the parks every single day. Whether you have kids or if you go out and walk around our many trails that are within our parks, those are the things you're going to see. You're going to see the grass not being mowed. You're going to see the US 1 maintenance or the Riverview Park maintenance. You're going to see less special events that take place at Riverview Park, and less of those things will start to happen. So those are probably the bigger impacts. With that being said, it comes down to whether we can find alternative revenue sources that could potentially come from this. And Councilmember Dodd, I don't know if you need to, and I apologize, Vice Mayor McPartland has shown up and Mayor Jones have shown up as well to make sure to recognize they're here with that. So.
Yeah, Mark Diedrich. So first of all, I think we all know that taxes are not going to ever go down. So, but second of all, I want to know why does municipalities, whether it be City of Sebastian or Indian River County, why aren't they screaming to high heavens to the state legislature, whom our representative is Brackett and our senator is Grawl, who have not communicated back to me, period, when I try to get to them? Why haven't you communicated to them that what they're going to do, they're not telling us where the revenue is going to be generated from, and they're going to put it out into a public referendum, and they're not going to tell you that you're going to pay 15% in sales tax as opposed to 7% in sales tax. So why aren't you screaming to the high heavens to bring that out and get that shown for us? Thank you.
Yes, sir. So what I will say is that from the city standpoint, whether it's our council or from a staffing level, we have expressed our concern to the legislature. Not just our representatives, but other representatives across the state. We have expressed our concern with this. Part of why we're doing this workshop is to inform the voters. That way, when you go to the polling place in November, whatever ends up being on that ballot, you can make an informed decision. And if the decision is made that you're willing to see some reduction in some areas across the city, at least you were given the information from the city. But yes, I can tell you we have had those conversations with them, and we provided them with documents that show what the fiscal impact would be to the city and how it's different from other areas in the city. I will say that, we hear it a lot that one size doesn't fit all, and this one definitely doesn't fit everybody across the state. I think that, there has to be some looking into that and addressing how that could potentially be addressed from the state level.
Good morning. Thank you for this workshop. My name is Julie Judson. I'm a 40-year-plus resident of Sebastian. Love it here. Love the small town feel. I like Ron DeSantis, but what is his end game by getting rid of the property taxes? We all want to save money. Let's just all agree to that. But to go to 15% sales tax, that's just crazy. I mean, I'm sure every small town in Florida is in the same predicament. So what's the answer? It's very complicated.
Well, I want to be clear, and I want to state it. The 15% sales tax has not been something that has been discussed across the legislature. That is not out open and in those. So there's not an implementing bill that is accompanying this House Joint Resolution at the current time. At some point they will have to establish an implementing bill, and what that outlines typically is how the bill, when it passes or if it passes the voters, how it would be implemented. As I mentioned earlier, there's been some talk about making up revenues for fiscally constrained counties. We do not fall in a fiscally constrained county according to their metrics. However, I think that when you look at our metrics of how the impact in totality to our general fund would be, we should kind of fall somewhere in one of those metrics, but we won't, and we currently do not. So I don't want to go down the path of how sales tax increases or any of that potential, because that has not been discussed from a legislative standpoint in any bills at this time. I think what we have to focus on from the city is how we can make up $4 million, whether that, I think that involves a combination of efforts. I think it involves us having to look at additional revenue sources, being creative with additional fees, or reduction in staffing. So I think those are probably the realities.
Susan LaRusso. I've been a 25-year resident here in Sebastian. Tell a little story of where I came from. In Connecticut, there was a governor, Lowell Weicker, who wanted to start the state income tax, which Connecticut never had, and told us all the wonderful things that we would get if we did approve the state income tax, and it did get approved. They did knock down our sales tax, and by the time I left Connecticut, not only was it back up to before the state income tax. It was more than the state income tax. I recently read that state of Florida, Tallahassee, is looking at a bill to take away home rule from planning and zoning. It's not written yet, but if the state is going to regulate our zoning laws, we won't have a say of what gets built, how it gets built, where it gets built. So by controlling our money and then controlling our vote, it's taking a lot away from our city, many cities. You know, as others have said, we're not Orlando, we're not Miami. We're a small fishing village, and there is just no way that 50% tax, you know, property tax, can be made up just by, you're going to raise the fees, you're going to cut the staff, then people are going to complain their roads aren't getting fixed. Well, you wanted the property tax removed. People are going to complain about drainage. That is a complaint that goes on forever. Well, get out there and shovel your own swale because we don't have the people for it anymore. You know, this is really bad, and the word has to get out not to eliminate the property tax.
Thank you, ma'am. And just, I will state, since we're on one topic here with property taxes, I'd be happy to discuss some of the bills, you know, offline, outside of this, in regards to development and things like that. There are quite a few bills that are currently in legislative discussion. As we, over the next 3 weeks, they got 3 more weeks of session. Other questions or comments in regards to property tax? Yes, ma'am.
Name is Sandra Williamson. What's going to happen to all the bonds, the tax-free municipal bonds that are backed by ad valorem taxes? They're going to go into default, including the state of Florida that has a ton of GO bonds out there.
Yeah, I mean, I can tell you, I know that there's many municipalities that have those, and I don't have an answer for that. I know it was asked on the House floor last Thursday, which if you haven't seen that discussion, it's a good discussion on the floor. Many good questions were asked, but that was something that was discussed there. But it's not included in the bill on how to address those or anything. And I will state, I know I've talked a lot about HJR 203 because it is the one bill that's passed the House. There are other bills out there. There are other, you know, different cuts and different ways of looking at property taxes. But I know the House has made that their priority, and then we have yet to kind of, I don't think the Senate has kind of made their determination of where they're going to look to go. So that'll be something we're keeping a very close eye on. And unfortunately, the reason we're having this now with so little information is because we want to provide the facts of the services and everything that's provided to our residents. Once it becomes a referendum, we are not allowed to advocate for or against it. So I think, you know, this was our chance to get out information in regards to what property taxes are used for within the city.
Thank you. Sorry to hog the mic. You mentioned that our city has roughly 6 city employees for every 1,000 residents. Just as a frame of reference, surrounding communities or even comparable communities that are not near us, can you give us an example of where we fall in line with other communities in regards to our city staffing?
Yeah, I mean, I know that one other city, and I don't have those exact numbers in front of me, but I can tell you that there's one other city in this county that is closer to, I believe, 8 or 9 per 1,000. It varies widely. There are differing factors that factor into that, and it's the reason why it's not on a slide here to compare it to the state average is because we don't have a utility, so we don't have water and wastewater. And so a lot of times municipalities, those numbers can get construed different ways because of those differing factors that come into it. So it is a little difficult to compare city by city, but I can tell you that our number has actually decreased. So back in 2006, because a lot of times it's referenced going back to 2020 or 2006 and those numbers. In 2006, the city of Sebastian had 7.63 employees per thousand. And in last year, or 2025, we were at 6.24, and now this year, 2026, we're at 5.97 employees. Any other questions? Yes, sir.
Yeah, my name is Michael Ho. I've been here probably about under 5 years, but I'm thinking the idea with the parking and the boat ramp fees and stuff like that, that might not be a bad idea. And I don't know if you guys have looked into that to see how much revenue we could get from that. I mean, probably don't make me the nicest guy in town, but if everybody else has parking fees, I don't know if Vero does parking fees or boat ramp fees, but I think that would be one way. I think probably increasing sales tax should be looked at for the residents and people visiting, should be looked at as a last resort if we could do that. I would request that. On behalf of all the rest of the residents. But yeah, I think the boat ramp fees and parking fees, because we do have a lot of events and we do have a lot of parking up and down the street and stuff like that, and people coming from out of town, and with it getting a lot busier, I think we could probably pull in some money from that. But I think that's about all I have.
So I'll just, I'm going to try to take that one by one in your comments. So sales tax, we're going to have no control over it. The state's going to be the one, if they were to look into it. Like I said, right now, I can tell you that it's been mentioned here or there that it could be something thrown out there, but I haven't seen anything formal come on sales tax. So I don't think that's up for this discussion currently. In regards to boat ramp and parking fees, one of the things we would have to look into, I know, for instance, our boat ramps, they were constructed using certain grant dollars that we can't charge to launch your boat, but we can charge to park your trailer. So there's different things that we would have to look at in regards to parking, and that complete in-depth look hasn't taken place yet. But like I said, it has not been so far made a priority. Not to say that it can't, but currently it has not.
Michael Anderson. I would love to save money on my property taxes, but I realize that we have to fund this, our community. Isn't there a local component to the sales tax? I don't know if it's county or city based that you have control over.
So in one of our revenue sources, and sorry, let me just pull up that. So within a half-cent sales tax does go into our general fund. That is part of our intergovernmental revenue. So that is the 21% of our general fund revenues by type. So we do receive that. It's a half-cent sales tax that goes into that general fund revenue market that is there as well, yes.
Something that the city council can, or Sebastian can raise or lower, or is that a county, or where does that, who controls that?
Yeah, so it's a state mechanism that it's just their percentage point that we get back from them to be able to assist us in operating. And that just for budgetary numbers, that local half-cent sales tax generates about $2.5 million in a half-cent sales tax for the city.
Brian, in anticipation of possible reductions of property tax revenue, are you going to ask city departments to submit or find 2%, 3% reduction in their budget for this coming year?
So this coming year, yes. So we're currently in our capital portion of our budget. We have had discussions in multiple staff meetings in regards to being creative and looking at your departments and how we could reduce funding. Remember, this measure will go on the ballot in November, so we would have already established our fiscal year 27 budget by the time this goes to the voters. So I think we will probably, we'll do an exercise, and staff has already started looking at those measures and looking at how we could reduce. But this year, I think we will, it won't go into effect until our budgeting cycle that falls within the summer of fiscal year of 27. So we still have this summer to get through with this upcoming budget. And, you know, we'll have this obviously in the back of our minds, and we'll go through some different exercises with this. But I can tell you, and you can speak to any of them, they've already been informed to start looking at these measures. Anyone else?
I've been here about 25 years. I'm glad I came to this first meeting. Can you just say your name again? Jeff. I'm glad I came to this first meeting, first one I've ever attended, which I can't understand why. I'm definitely against property taxes. You haven't proved to me what's good for it here. I mean, there's parks and things out there that they're redoing and stuff. We can't use them. There's fences, a bunch of guys, I'm from Connecticut too. We used to get a bunch of guys and go play football or baseball. There's a locked fence. We can't get in there and play on a weekend that I'm paying for.
Can I just correct you there?
Yes.
Barber Street Sports Complex is not locked. It never has been locked. So I don't know, it could be somewhere else, but it's not the city of Sebastian.
Maybe not locked, but they'll throw you off.
Skateboard rink. And then after about 2 years that I was here, maybe 3, they decided to unlock the skateboard rink and let them go in there and skateboard. But when I first came here, you had to pay to get in there. So no, they wasn't all free.
I can't understand it. I mean, there's no answers. Well, just like we're getting buffaloed into the garbage bill. These people don't understand how we got buffaloed into that. Paying 2 garbage bills, and they don't really understand it yet, but we are. Yeah, I mean, it went mandatory in Sebastian. It used to be just subscription. That's a complete joke. Complete. Thank you.
Thank you. Did someone else have a question? No? All right, well, last chance for questions. Any other? Okay, well, thank you all for coming. I'll be here. I'll be available if you have any questions for afterwards that you'd like to ask. But thank you all for coming out. We appreciate it.